It was supposed to be another delightful family surprises segment where kids shared their special plans to make loved ones happy, surprise parties, handmade gifts, or sweet gestures of appreciation. Ellen cherished these moments that showcased the pure generosity of children's hearts, their innocent belief that love could fix anything, their natural instinct to bring joy to the people they cared about most. But when 10-year-old Grace Patterson approached the family surprise station with an expression that carried wisdom far beyond her years and a determination that spoke of something much deeper than typical childhood mischief, Ellen had no idea she was about to witness one of the most profound examples of love in the face of loss she'd ever encountered. Grace's surprise would reveal a secret project born from heartbreak and a child's desperate desire to preserve what time was slowly stealing away. Grace stood at the microphone wearing a soft yellow cardigan that looked handmade, her strawberry blonde hair pulled back with a simple headband, clutching a small notebook against her chest. But it wasn't her neat appearance that caught Ellen's attention. It was something in her green eyes, a gravity that seemed too heavy for someone who should still believe in fairy tales and happy endings. Behind her composed exterior was a child carrying knowledge that no 10-year-old should have to bear alone. "Hi there, sweetheart." Ellen approached Grace with her signature warmth, immediately sensing this child had something important to share. "What's your name?" "Grace Patterson," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I'm 10 years old, and I live with my grandma, Rose." "Grace Patterson, what a lovely name. And you live with your grandma. That must be special." "So Grace, this is our family surprises segment where kids tell us about special things they're planning for their families. What's your surprise?" Ellen expected the usual childhood responses. Maybe Grace was planning to bake cookies for her grandmother or create a photo album. She was prepared to celebrate whatever sweet gesture this thoughtful child wanted to share. Grace looked directly into Ellen's eyes with an intensity that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. When she spoke, her words carried a weight that seemed impossible for someone so young. "I'm making a memory book for my grandma before she forgets everything," Grace said with the matter-of-fact tone children use when discussing things they don't fully understand but know are important. Ellen's smile faltered slightly as her brain processed this unexpected response. "Before she forgets everything? Grace, what do you mean by that?" Grace opened her notebook and held it carefully, as if it contained treasures. "My grandma has the forgetting disease, but she doesn't know that I know. My mom and dad talk about it when they think I'm sleeping, but I heard them say the doctor called it Alzheimer's." The silence that followed was profound. Ellen felt like the air had shifted in the studio. Here was a 10-year-old discussing one of life's most heartbreaking diagnoses with more grace and purpose than most adults could muster.
"Oh, Grace,"
Ellen whispered, kneeling down to the child's eye level. "How long have you known about your grandma's condition?" Grace thought carefully about this. "I started noticing things about 6 months ago. She would tell me the same story twice in one day, or she'd forget that she already made me lunch. Sometimes she'd call me by my mom's name when my mom was little." Ellen felt her heart breaking for this observant child who had been quietly watching her grandmother slip away. "And your family doesn't know that you know?" Grace shook her head. "They're trying to protect me, but I'm not a baby. I can see that grandma is getting confused more often. And I heard Mom crying on the phone with Aunt Sarah, saying they don't know how much time they have before Grandma doesn't remember any of us anymore." Ellen was struggling to maintain her composure. The maturity and emotional intelligence radiating from this child was extraordinary. "Grace, tell me about this memory book you're making." Grace's face lit up with the first genuine smile Ellen had seen since she'd started talking. "I'm writing down all of Grandma's stories before she forgets them. Like how she met Grandpa at a dance when she was 18, and how she made his favorite pie every Sunday for 40 years until he died." Grace opened her notebook to show Ellen pages covered in careful, childlike handwriting. "I write down everything she tells me, about when my mom was little, about the house she grew up in, about her favorite songs and recipes and the way she used to garden." Ellen could see that Grace had been working on this project with incredible dedication. The notebook was filled with detailed stories, questions Grace had asked, and even small drawings. "Grace, this is beautiful. How do you get your grandma to tell you all these stories?" "I ask her questions every day when I get home from school. I sit with her and say things like, 'Grandma, tell me about when you were young,' or 'What was your favorite thing about being a mom?' And she always has the best stories." Grace flipped to another page in her notebook. "She doesn't remember what happened yesterday, but she remembers everything from when she was young, so I write it all down because someday she might not remember those things either." Ellen had to pause to wipe her eyes. This child's understanding of her grandmother's condition and her proactive response to it was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Grace, does your grandma know you're writing down her stories? She knows I like hearing them, but she doesn't know why I'm writing them down. I don't want her to feel sad about the forgetting disease. Ellen stood up and addressed the entire studio. Ladies and gentlemen, Grace is 10 years old, and she's created one of the most beautiful and important projects I've ever heard of. She's preserving her grandmother's memories and stories before Alzheimer's can take them away. Ellen returned to Grace, sitting down beside her. Grace, can you read me one of the stories you've written down? Grace flipped through her notebook carefully, looking for the right story. This one is my favorite, she said, finding a page covered in her neat handwriting. It's about how Grandma and Grandpa fell in love. Grace began to read in her clear young voice. Grandma Rose was 18 and wore a blue dress to the spring dance at the community center. She was shy and stood by the punch bowl because she didn't know how to dance very well. Grandpa Tom saw her from across the room and thought she was the prettiest girl there, but he was too nervous to ask her to dance. Ellen was already tearing up at the sweetness of the story and the care with which Grace had recorded it. Grace continued reading. Finally, the last song started playing, and Grandpa Tom knew it was his last chance. He walked over to Grandma Rose and said, "I don't know how to dance very well either, but would you like to figure it out together?" And they danced to Moon River and stepped on each other's feet and laughed the whole time. Grace looked up from her notebook. Grandma says that was the moment she knew she wanted to spend her whole life laughing with him. And they were married for 43 years until Grandpa went to heaven. Ellen was crying openly now, and so was most of the studio audience. The beauty of the story preserved by a child who understood its precious fragility was overwhelming. Grace, that's one of the most beautiful love stories I've ever heard, and the fact that you're the one preserving it makes it even more special. Grace nodded seriously. I have lots more stories, about how Grandma taught my mom to bake, about the victory garden she grew during the war, about the way she used to sing lullabies to all the babies in our family. Ellen felt a surge of determination. This child's project was too important, too beautiful, too necessary to remain a secret family surprise. Grace, what if I told you that we could help you make an even bigger memory book for your grandma? What if we could help you preserve not just her stories, but her voice telling them? Grace's eyes widened with possibility. You mean record her talking? I mean create a complete memory archive. Videos of her telling stories, recordings of her voice, photographs of her favorite things, everything that makes your grandma who she is. Ellen made a decision that would extend this moment far beyond the studio. Grace, I want to meet your Grandma Rose, and I want to help you finish your project before. Ellen paused, searching for age-appropriate words. Before the forgetting disease takes the stories away, Grace finished gently. Yes, before that happens. Grace, are your parents here today? Grace nodded and pointed toward the audience. They're sitting over there. They think I'm just going to talk about wanting to surprise Grandma with a scrapbook. Ellen signaled to her production team, and within moments Grace's parents, David and Linda Patterson, were making their way down to the stage area. Ellen could see the confusion in their faces. They had no idea what their daughter had been sharing. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, I'm Ellen. Grace has been telling me about something incredible she's been working on. Linda Patterson looked worried. Is everything okay? Grace, what have you been talking about? Grace looked at her parents with the serious expression of someone about to reveal a carefully kept secret. Mom, Dad, I know about Grandma's Alzheimer's. I've known for months. Ellen watched as both parents' faces went through a series of emotions: shock, concern, sadness, and then something that looked like relief. Grace, honey, how did you? David began. I hear things, and I see things. I'm not a baby, Dad. I know Grandma is getting sicker, and I know she's going to forget us someday. Linda knelt down beside her daughter. Grace, we were trying to protect you. We didn't want you to worry about things you couldn't control. But Mom, I wasn't just worrying. I was doing something. Grace held up her notebook. I've been writing down all of Grandma's stories so we don't lose them when she forgets them. Ellen watched as Grace's parents realized what their daughter had been doing, the incredible maturity and love that had driven her secret project. Grace, Linda said with tears in her eyes, can we see what you've written? Grace opened her notebook and began showing her parents the pages of carefully recorded memories. As they read, Ellen could see their amazement at their daughter's thoroughness, her attention to detail, her deep understanding of what was important to preserve. Ellen, David said, looking up from the notebook, we had no idea Grace was processing this so thoughtfully. We've been so focused on protecting her that we missed how much she wanted to help. Ellen addressed the family gently. Grace has created something beautiful here, but I think we can make it even more special. I'd like to propose that we help Grace complete her project in a way that will preserve not just the stories, but everything about your grandmother that makes her unique. Ellen looked directly into the camera. We're going to bring our production team to meet Grandma Rose, and we're going to help Grace create a complete memory archive. Videos, recordings, photographs, everything that captures who Rose Patterson is before Alzheimer's takes those memories away. Grace was bouncing with excitement. Really? We can record Grandma telling her stories? We can record everything, Grace. Her voice, her laugh, her favorite songs, the way she moves when she's cooking, everything that makes her special to your family. But Ellen had one more surprise. And Grace, I want you to be the interviewer. You know better than anyone what questions to ask and which stories are most important to preserve. Grace's face lit up with pride and responsibility. I've been practicing being a good listener. Grandma taught me that the most important part of hearing stories is asking the right questions and remembering why the story matters to the person telling it. Ellen was struck by this child's wisdom about the art of preserving memories. That's exactly right, Grace. You've already become an expert at something most adults struggle with, truly listening to understand, not just to respond. 1 week later, Ellen's cameras accompanied Grace and her family to Grandma Rose's house, where they spent an entire day recording memories. The footage showed Grace in her element, sitting beside her grandmother, asking thoughtful questions, drawing out stories with the skill of someone who had been practicing for months. The most powerful moment came when Grace asked her grandmother to tell the story of her first dance with Grandpa Tom. As Rose recounted the tale that Grace had already recorded in her notebook, Grace followed along with her written version, word for word, proof of how carefully she had been listening and preserving these precious memories. During the filming, Rose became emotional when she realized what Grace had been doing. "Sweet Grace," she said, reaching for her granddaughter's hand, "you've been taking care of my memories even better than I have." Grace simply smiled and replied, "That's what family does, Grandma. We take care of each other's important things." The production team was amazed by Grace's natural interviewing skills and her intuitive understanding of how to make her grandmother comfortable while drawing out meaningful stories. Grace had developed her own method. She would start each conversation by asking Rose to describe what she was feeling, then guide her into memories connected to those emotions. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became one of Ellen's most shared segments. The video of Grace interviewing her grandmother sparked a movement of families creating their own memory projects with elderly relatives facing cognitive decline. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was for the Patterson family themselves. Grace's secret project had opened conversations about Alzheimer's that allowed them to face Rose's diagnosis together rather than in fearful isolation. Grace continued her interviews with her grandmother, creating a library of memories that would sustain their family long after Rose's ability to share new stories had faded. 3 months later, Ellen received a package from the Patterson family. It contained a bound book. Grace's original notebook had been professionally transcribed and illustrated, creating a beautiful family heirloom titled "The Stories Grandma Rose Wants Us to Remember." The dedication page read, "To Grandma Rose, who taught us that love is preserved in stories, and to Ellen, who helped us understand that sometimes the most important family projects are the ones started by 10-year-old hearts." Grace's memory book became a template for thousands of families dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia. Her story proved that children often see solutions that adults miss, that love finds ways to preserve what matters most, and that sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from someone young enough to believe that every story deserves to be saved. Because sometimes a 10-year-old secret project can teach the world that memories aren't just what we remember, they're what we choose to preserve, protect, and pass on. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone facing memory loss isn't trying to help them remember, but ensuring that their most precious stories will be remembered forever. Grace showed everyone that love doesn't accept loss quietly. It fights back with notebooks and questions and the fierce determination of a child who refuses to let the most important stories disappear.